Las Vegas, February 1972. Inside the Hilton showroom, 2,100 fans filled the red velvet seats, waiting for Elvis Presley. But that night, a trembling young guitarist unknown to the crowd slipped through the noise and caught Elvis's attention. What unfolded in front of everyone turned into a moment that still ripples through music. History. The year was 1968. America was raw from wounds that seemed too deep to close. Martin Luther King Jr. had just been silenced in Memphis. Bobby Kennedy fell weeks later. Streets shook with protest, cities burned with unrest, and television screens glowed with the war in Vietnam. Families watched their sons leave for jungles they couldn't pronounce, and many never came back. It felt as if the whole country was gasping for air, and then on December 3rd, 1968, Presley walked back into living rooms. NBC aired what the world now calls the '68 Comeback Special, but at that time it wasn't a comeback, it was a gamble. Elvis was 33 years old, dressed in a skin-tight black leather suit, sweat shining on his brow. For nearly a decade, he'd been locked in Hollywood soundstages, singing songs about clambakes and cowboys. His crown had slipped. The Beatles had arrived. Motown had risen. Elvis was fading into nostalgia. But that night, everything changed. He sat surrounded by fans in a boxing ring-like stage, strumming his guitar raw and unpolished. He laughed. He stumbled over chords. He told stories about his early days at Sun Records. But then, when the lights hit, when the music surged, he sang with a fire America hadn't seen in years. Heartbreak Hotel, Hound Dog, Can't Help Falling In. Love. The crowd leaned forward as if watching a man rediscover his soul in real time. Elvis wasn't a polished movie star that night. He was hungry again, his voice carrying the ache of a nation searching for hope, and the world felt it across the country. Families hushed in their living rooms. Teenagers who had traded Elvis for the Beatles sat frozen, realizing the king wasn't gone. Middle-aged parents, who once banned rock and roll from their homes, now saw a grown man commanding respect with nothing but a guitar and his voice. And in Memphis, in small diners across Tennessee, older fans whispered, "He's back. Lord, he's back." But the show was more than music. It was timing. In a year defined by funerals, assassinations, and broken dreams, Elvis reminded people what it felt like to believe again. His smile, his swagger, his grit, he carried something that politicians and preachers couldn't. He carried joy behind the curtain. Even the producers felt it. Director Steve Binder later said, "Elvis gave America back its confidence that night, and in many ways he did. The numbers proved it. 42% of the nation tuned in, millions upon millions of eyes glued to a man many thought was finished. Record executives saw gold. Hollywood saw resurrection. But the truth was simpler. Elvis had reignited his own fire. 1969 arrived. And with it came Las Vegas. Not the Vegas of flashing billboards and Elvis impersonators we know now, but the brand new International Hotel. A 2,000-seat showroom built for spectacle. On July 31st, Elvis walked on stage in a white jumpsuit for the very first time. The crowd was packed with celebrities: Cary Grant, Sammy Davis Jr., even the press who had once written him off. He opened with blue suede shoes. The horns blasted. The drums kicked. And once again, America erupted. Night after night, he shattered records. People flew in from across the world just to watch him sweat, kneel, and pour out every ounce of himself on stage. Elvis wasn't just performing, he was proving. Proving to himself, proving to the doubters, proving to the country that the king could rise from ashes. By 1970, Elvis had transformed from fading movie star into living legend once again. The spark had been lit, and it was brighter than ever. But sparks, no matter how brilliant, don't last forever. By the dawn of the 1970s, Elvis Presley was everywhere. His face shone from billboards on the Las Vegas Strip. His voice thundered nightly across sold-out showrooms, and his records spun endlessly on jukeboxes. The boy from Tupelo had become not just a star but an institution in 1970 alone. Elvis sold more concert tickets than any other performer in the world. His jumpsuits sparkled like armor, stitched with rhinestones that reflected every flashbulb. Fans screamed his name, women wept in the aisles, and reporters wrote that Las Vegas belonged to him. "The king has claimed his throne," one headline declared, but with every crown comes weight. Behind the curtain, the cheers faded into silence that felt heavier than the spotlight. Elvis lived in hotel suites, guarded by security. He rarely walked outside. Crowds chased his car down highways, flashing cameras in the night. Every handshake was monitored, every smile rehearsed. He was adored, but he was also trapped. By 1971, the world noticed the change. His shoulders carried more than music. He gained weight, sometimes losing it just as quickly. Long nights in Vegas bled into dawn, and his energy no longer came naturally. To keep pace with the grueling schedule to shows a night, 7 days a week, he leaned on pills. Uppers to rise, downers to sleep. Doctors wrote the prescriptions, and Elvis obeyed. At the same time, his heart longed for something ordinary. He was a father now. Lisa Marie had been born in 1968, and he wanted to be present. He played with her on the carpet of Graceland, singing nursery rhymes on his guitar. But fame's machine didn't stop. RCA demanded new records. Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, booked more tours. And each time Elvis thought about slowing down, the world reminded him, the king does not rest. The pressures stretched into his marriage. Priscilla, once the young girl who had stood quietly by his side, now felt the distance widen. She watched as the man she loved became consumed by a cycle of performance, exhaustion, and escape. Arguments rose. Silence followed. By 1972, whispers of separation drifted through tabloids and behind the gates of Graceland. Those whispers were real. Still, on stage, Elvis was electric. He poured his ache into music, and audiences felt it. In January 1973, he stood on a Honolulu stage for Aloha from Hawaii via satellite. The broadcast reached over 1 billion viewers worldwide, the first concert ever beamed live across the globe. Elvis wore a white cape embroidered with an eagle, spreading his arms wide as if he could hold the world together. The performance was triumphant. He sang an American trilogy with a passion that left fans breathless. He bowed, sweat dripping, as fireworks lit the Hawaiian sky. The reviews declared it historic. Elvis had proven once more that no one, no Beatle, no Stones could command the world like he could. But when the cameras shut off and the applause dissolved into memory, he returned to solitude. The marriage he tried to save ended in divorce papers in 1973. Priscilla left, Lisa Marie in her arms, though she promised Elvis he would always be part of their daughter's life. And so the king idol to millions, loved by strangers, sat alone, surrounded by gold records, jewelry, and the trappings of success. He found himself haunted by the one truth fame could not change. Applause cannot hold you at night. The weight of the crown pressed harder. And Elvis, the man who had once given America back its hope, now searched desperately for his own. By 1974, the glitter of Las Vegas had begun to tarnish. Elvis Presley was still filling arenas, still dazzling fans with capes and karate kicks, but behind the rhinestones, cracks were widening. The king was tired. The endless touring schedule pushed him to the edge. Colonel Tom Parker booked him relentlessly, chasing profits, while Elvis's body begged for rest. He had grown heavier, his face rounder, his movements slower. Still, the machine demanded he keep going. Every night, he walked out to thunderous applause. And every night, he gave what little he had left. Audiences began to whisper. Some noticed he slurred his words between songs. Others saw him forget lyrics, relying on his band to carry him through. Rumors swirled about his health, his weight, his dependence on pills. Tabloids called it the king in decline, but for the fans in the front row, the ones who reached for his scarves, who cried just to touch his hand, none of that mattered. They still saw their Elvis. Behind closed doors, it was different. Graceland had grown quiet. Lisa Marie visited, but only his divorce from Priscilla had left him lonelier than ever. He surrounded himself with the Memphis Mafia, his group of close friends, but even in their laughter, Elvis seemed distant. He wandered the halls at night, restless, often calling friends at 3 a.m. just to talk. He confessed his fears in half-jokes, saying, "I'm so tired, man. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." The pills had become chains. Painkillers for his back, sleeping pills for his nights, stimulants to push through shows. Doctors wrote prescriptions by the handful, and Elvis, desperate for relief, took them without question. Each day became a blur of highs and crashes, applause and silence. Still, moments of brilliance broke through. In 1974, in Memphis, he performed a homecoming concert that critics praised as one of his best. His voice soared on gospel numbers, his eyes lit with fire during "How Great Thou Art." For an hour, he reminded the world of the man he had been. But the energy always faded, leaving him more drained than before. By 1976, the decline was visible to all. His jumpsuits were let out to fit his growing waistline. He sometimes stumbled on stage, at times sitting down mid-performance just to catch his breath. Fans still cheered, but some wept not from joy but from worry. They sensed what Elvis himself knew. Something was slipping away. Yet Elvis never stopped trying. Even when he could barely stand, he pushed through concerts across America's Cincinnati, Denver, St. Louis, each one another brick in the wall of exhaustion. He signed autographs, smiled for cameras, and kissed fans in the front row. To them, he was still the king. To himself, he was a man fighting a battle he was losing. In private, he clung to music. Gospel remained his refuge. Late at night, he gathered his friends around the piano, singing hymns until dawn. His voice, though strained, carried the same soul it had in his youth. In those quiet hours, without costumes or cameras, he was simply Elvis Aaron Presley, a man searching for peace, but peace was growing harder to find. His health deteriorated rapidly. High blood pressure, liver damage, glaucoma ailments piled on top of addiction. Doctors warned him. Friends begged him. But the machine of fame rolled forward, dragging him with it. And so, by 1976, Elvis Presley stood at the edge of his final chapter. The cheers were still there, but faint. The spark was dimming. The king who had risen from Tupelo and reignited a nation now found himself fighting for breath. The fall was no longer a whisper, it was a reality. The summer of 1977 carried a heaviness that hung in the Memphis air. Elvis Presley was just 42 years old, but his body bore decades of strain. He was scheduled to begin another tour yet, even as posters promised the king returns. Those closest to him wondered if he could survive another run. On stage, the decline was undeniable. In June, at his final concert in Indianapolis's Market Square Arena, fans witnessed a man both fragile and magnificent. Elvis struggled to move, his face pale and swollen, but when he opened his mouth to sing Hurt, the arena fell silent. His voice cracked, then soared, the old fire flashing just long enough to remind everyone why they loved him. For that one moment, he was still the king, but backstage, reality was cruel. Elvis needed help dressing, sometimes gasping for breath after only a few steps. His inner circle, Joe Esposito, Charlie Hodge, the men who had followed him for years, worried aloud. They whispered about the prescription bottles lined up at Graceland, about the sleepless nights, about the constant fatigue. Still, Elvis waved them off, insisting he had obligations. "The people paid to see me, man," he said. "I can't let them down." In Graceland, the days grew quieter. He spent hours in his bedroom, curtains drawn, the world outside held at a distance. Lisa Marie visited during the summer, bringing a flicker of joy. Elvis adored his daughter. He doted on her, sang with her, promised her trips he knew he couldn't keep. In her laughter, he found his last true comfort, yet the cycles continued. Pills for sleep, pills for pain, pills to wake him up. Doctors came and went, some enabling, others pleading. Ginger Alden, his fiancée, stood by him in those final months, often watching helplessly as exhaustion consumed him. Elvis spoke of plans, marriage, new tours, even a film project, but his actions betrayed his failing health. August arrived. The Memphis heat pressed against Graceland's white walls. Elvis rehearsed sporadically for the upcoming tour, but his energy was gone. Friends recall seeing him at the piano, softly playing gospel hymns late into the night. He lingered on unchained melody, his voice faint but filled with yearning, as if he sensed time was running out. On the night of August 15th, Elvis played racquetball with friends at his personal court. He laughed, sweated, even sang a few lines of gospel before heading back inside. It was a rare burst of life, almost defiant. Then, in the early hours of August 16th, he returned to his room. He read through spiritual books, kissed Lisa Marie goodnight, and finally lay down by mid-morning. Graceland was shaken. Ginger Alden discovered him collapsed on the bathroom floor. Panic erupted. Ambulances rushed. The news broke fast. Elvis Presley had died at 42. The world reacted in waves of disbelief. Radio stations interrupted programming. Fans poured onto Elvis Presley Boulevard, some collapsing in tears, others clutching photographs and homemade signs. Vigils erupted outside Graceland. Flowers covered the gates. People who had never met him wept as if they had lost family. August 18th, 1977. Tens of thousands lined the streets of Memphis for his funeral procession. White horses pulled a hearse carrying the king, trailed by limousines filled with family and friends. Fans reached out toward the car as it passed, desperate for one last connection. In the hush of that moment, grief and gratitude collided. Elvis Aaron Presley was gone, but the echoes of his voice lingered, hanging in the air like a hymn. The world had lost more than a singer. It had lost a symbol of dreams, rebellion, and compassion, and yet, something in Memphis told everyone, this was not the end. Graceland fell silent in the days after Elvis's death, yet the silence did not last. Almost instantly, it became a place of pilgrimage. Fans from across the world, Japan, Germany, Brazil, stood shoulder to shoulder outside its gates, pressing flowers, candles, and handwritten letters into the iron fence. It was grief expressed as devotion, as if each offering could bridge the impossible distance between them and the man they had lost. The ripples began close to home. Lisa Marie Presley, only 9 years old, inherited a legacy she could not yet comprehend. Priscilla, once his wife and now the guardian of his memory, stepped into a new role. Together, they would ensure Graceland remained intact, not just as a house, but as a living museum of Elvis's life. By 1982, the mansion opened to the public, instantly drawing more than 300,000 visitors in its first year. Today, millions still walk those halls, pausing at the meditation garden where Elvis rests. His music surged again. Within weeks of his passing, records flew off store shelves, with albums like Moody Blue selling faster than any during his lifetime. Radio stations looped his hits, turning highways into impromptu memorials as car stereos carried his voice in unison. For younger listeners, Elvis was suddenly not just their parents' idol, but their own discovery, a star whose voice bridged generations. And then came the stories, told and retold by those who had shared the stage with him. Musicians recalled his generosity, slipping new performers the spotlight, encouraging them, as he had once done for that trembling guitarist in Las Vegas years before. Crew members spoke of his laughter backstage, the corny jokes, the way he insisted on introducing his band members by name during every show. To them, Elvis was not just the king, he was a man who lifted others as he climbed. The cultural ripple extended far beyond Memphis. In London, Paul McCartney remarked that without Elvis, there would be no Beatles. Bruce Springsteen confessed that when he leapt the gates of Graceland in 1976, it wasn't fame he sought, but proximity to the dream Elvis represented. In Tupelo, the small Mississippi town where he was born, a memorial chapel rose to honor the boy who had once wandered barefoot through its dusty streets. Even the artifacts of his life became sacred markers. The white jumpsuits, the capes, the gold-rimmed sunglasses, displayed like relics, studied by fans who searched for meaning in every stitch. The microphone he last held in Indianapolis, the tattered guitar strap he once gifted to a struggling musician. Each object carried weight because each carried memory. Yet perhaps the deepest ripple was in the countless people who never met him but felt changed by him. Fans wrote that his music carried them through heartbreak, through war, through lonely nights far from home. They spoke of courage found in his songs, of joy rediscovered in his laughter. Elvis had made them feel seen, and in his absence they carried that torch forward, treating strangers as kin because, for a few minutes in song, he had made the world a family. By the 1990s, Elvis's image re-emerged through remastered tracks, tribute concerts, and impersonators in every corner of the globe. Some were comic, others were reverent. All testified to a truth. Elvis was not fading, he was multiplying, becoming more than one man could ever be, and yet, at the heart of it all remained that quiet truth. Elvis's greatest legacy was not only the records sold or the shows performed. It was the compassion threaded through his choices, the pauses, the risks, the unthinkable gestures of humanity that turned moments into miracles. Even now, when fans gather each August for the candlelight vigil at Graceland, the hush of the crowd echoes the hush that once fell in the Hilton showroom. Silence, then song, loss, then legacy, and the ripples continue still, in the glitter of neon and the roar of arenas. Elvis Presley carried more than music. He carried the weight of expectation, the ache of loneliness, and the rare courage to pause for others when the world demanded speed. That duality legend and man defined him. His story was never just about fame. It was about the silences between the notes, the moments when compassion outweighed convenience, whether granting an unknown musician a stage, or quietly comforting fans who reached for his hand. Elvis showed that greatness is measured not only in applause, but in empathy. When he passed, the grief was overwhelming, but so too was the unity. People of every age, nation, and background stood side by side, bound by music and memory. In those crowds, his true legacy became clear. Elvis had turned strangers into community, song into sanctuary. The moral lingers. In a noisy world, the power to stop, to notice, to care can change a life and echo for decades. Elvis proved it under the bright lights of Las Vegas and in the quiet halls of Graceland. Sometimes the greatest legends are written not in sound, but in silence. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that compassion still changes lives. Were you or someone you know ever present at an Elvis show? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your memories. And stay tuned for more untold stories of music's legends